And first of all, tomorrow is Zombie Awareness Month. Well, not the whole month, just the first day of it. So I've decided to sequester myself in this room and read. Which is so not the norm for me. Today I wanted to give you a rundown on the lost classic, Gnomes, the Devil's Servants. It's a story I wrote when I was, I guess, probably 9. I had just read James Herbert's The Rats, which I picked up at the public library. Whenever my mom took me to the library, I would go over to the carousel with the paperbacks on it, and anything that showed like rats eating a guy's face, I would get. And I guess neither the librarian nor my parents knew what was in The Rats. It has a lot of grim, graphic social commentary, a lot of grittiness, a lot of horrific violence and suspense and filthy, dirty sex. And so, as I tended to do whenever I was really taken by a story, I said I was going to rip it off, but mine was going to be Gnomes, the Devil's Servants. The Gnomes, if I recall correctly, was an acronym. The G was for genetic. I'm guessing the E was for evil. I can't remember the rest. And the reason that I chose to go with gnomes, and I think in the story they were basically mutated rats, was because I just seen Stephen King's Cat's Eye, and I was totally obsessed with that little troll from it. So I decided that would be what they looked like. So I also completely ripped that off. In fact, the cover of the book, I would draw covers. What I would do is I would take a whole sheaf of notebook paper. Like I would take one of those 80 page spiral notebooks, and I would just rip all the pages and fold it over and staple the crease so that it roughly resembled the dimensions of a paperback, and then I'd fill it with the horrible story. And on the cover of this one, so I drew that troll, only now he was a gnomes, the Devil's Servants. I say gnomes because I think the S stood for something too. So he would be a gnomes. So the story concerned this American whose uncle dies in Britain, and he's the only living heir. He goes out, he sails, because that was the obviously most convenient way to go. He sails from America to Britain, and he goes to this old Victorian manor where his uncle had lived. He meets the lawyer. The lawyer turns into a werewolf for no reason. The guy and his wife, they find in the house like a magic dagger because it could kill werewolves. So they kill the lawyer, and then they're like, well, I think we've pretty much seen all there is to see in Britain. So they head back home, but they don't know that gnomes, the Devil's Servants, created by his mad scientist uncle, are now stowed away on the boat. And they get to America and they multiply like gnomes. There's a scene in an acid factory, and I figured acid has to come from somewhere. There must be factories where there are just gigantic vats of acid. And so this particular factory, staffed by 1,000 workers, is attacked by the gnomes, and of course all the vats rupture. And all the people are running upstairs. It's like a 10-floor factory, by the way, and the acid is inexplicably rising up floor by floor, dissolving people. And so there were paragraphs like 36 men were caught on the stairs and dissolved by the acid. There were now 964 men left, and it just gradually, I whittled away the men and the gnomes until it was just this 10-floor tower filled with acid. The guy and his wife who inadvertently ferried the gnomes to America, they end up getting killed. Sort of a twist. And a new protagonist is introduced named Jet Baker, the bar owner. Jet Baker's bar is assailed by the gnomes and burns to the ground, and he finds somehow that magic dagger, and he decides that he's going to track down the source of this plague. How he winds up in Britain back at the crazy uncle's manor. And he he calls for the house to be bulldozed because evidently he has that power. He just calls and says, "I'm a bar owner from another country and I want this house destroyed." He goes down into the basement with minutes to spare before bulldozers just come rampaging through the house. And in a scene completely ripped off from Herbert's the Rats, spoiler alert, down in the basement, he finds the bloated, disgusting, pale mother of all rats, and he stabs it with the dagger, and it bursts like a balloon, and then the devil shows up. I don't know if you remember, it's Gnomes the Devil's Servants. So I had to get her in there somehow. The devil is a female. She looks like Carmen Sandiego in this. And she's like, "I was behind everything." So, and then Jet Baker stabs her and she dies. The end. If my parents had known anything about Herbert's the Rats or what it would unleash in my own imagination, I'm sure they would have forbade me to read it as a child. And I'm glad that they did have restrictions on me. And I'm glad that they had a sense of boundaries and that they didn't do shit like let me pick my own name. I'm glad in particular that there were restrictions on books when I was a kid, because that made me want to read them more. And it probably has a lot to do with why I write horror now. They had this whole shelf of Stephen King books in their bedroom and I wasn't allowed to touch them. When they said don't go near those ever, that to a child says there's secret magic in those pages, and you become more determined than ever. So Mom, Dad, if I did still have my original first edition of Gnomes the Devil's Servants, which I unfortunately do not, I'm sure that I would append an acknowledgement in there thanking you for, and blaming you really,